Astrolab, newest keyboard from Arturia, and it's kind of coming at their 25th anniversary. So it's kind of a celebration thing, and it's brand new tech. And there's something really exciting about it, and maybe some things that are going to be kind of confusing to people at first. So what I want to do in this video is talk about what the keyboard is, what the keyboard isn't, who it's for, maybe compare it to some other products so that you can decide if this is actually something you need to pick up. And let's just establish right off the bat that this is some crazy technology. What they're doing here is, for the first time, really, as far as I know, they're taking software, amazing software, App-Astrolab Pro, the V Collection, Pigments, and they have put that into a keyboard that you can take with you with no computer. So all of the instruments that Arturia makes, we're talking dozens of synthesizer recreations like the DX7, all of these ones you're looking at here, with exception of the Mellotron. I do have to say that the Mellotron is one that isn't included so far with this new keyboard. But all of the other instruments they make, including augmented brass, augmented piano, all of those orchestral type instruments, their pianos, Rhodes, their electric pianos, and Pigments, can live inside of this keyboard, which to me is a crazy accomplishment. And I'm not going to say anything about the price on this one because I'm really not sure what the price is going to be when this is released. But they sent this over to me, and it's kind of an early version of it. So I know there are some things that are going to be different, but I also know that Arturia is a company that keeps adding to their existing products and making them better and updating them without charging the customer in most cases. So, you know, I've got the Polybrute, I've got the Microfreak. They keep releasing incredible updates to it. And I know that they're going to do the same thing with this one. So we're looking at the first version of this synthesizer. In this video, I don't necessarily want to walk through all the sounds and show you all the things that it can do. I know there's going to be amazing videos out there already by Arturia and maybe Loopop, and maybe, I bet you Sanjay C will do something incredible on this too. But what I want to do in this video is just say, okay, why would you choose this one over the other keyboards? And if you are this type of musician, which one should you actually get? So I've got some other things we'll look at here. I've got the Mini Freak. I've got one of their Keylab Essential keyboards. So let's just get into it, see what this thing's about, see what it does, see what it doesn't do, and then hit me up in the comments if you have other questions. And in future videos, I'll definitely be digging into the features that this thing has because it is awesome. And the other thing I want to talk about in this video is their V Collection software and Pigments and how that relates to what you get when you get App-Astrolab Pro software with any of their keyboards. Just remember that when you get this one, you get App-Astrolab Pro and all of those 2,000 patches on the keyboard itself. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, and before we even look at the keyboard itself, I do want to look at the other products and compare them. So what I've got right here is the Mini Freak, Arturia's Mini Freak, and this is a beautiful synthesizer. I've got a couple videos on it. Make sure you go check those out. And the reason I love this synthesizer so much is it's got, you know, all these knobs and sliders and ways of modulating sounds and creating your own sounds. It's got effects built in. And they've also got a software version of it called the Mini Freak V. So what that means is you can make patches on this synthesizer away from your computer, come to your computer, dump them onto your computer, and then now you have that software version which can play back that sound, and it sounds exactly the same. You can also work the other way. You can program a sound on a computer, dump it onto the synthesizer, take this on the road, and now you've got that patch that you created while you're sitting in your studio. So if you are a synth programmer, a sound designer, and you have dreams of making patches while you're sitting at the beach, this is the keyboard for you. This one, as you can see on the front here, we don't have the sliders that you'd have on their controllers. We have a bunch of knobs, and they are assigned already to some macros that are meant to be used with App-Astrolab, whether you're working with basically the App-Astrolab on board or the App-Astrolab software on the computer. But if you own the V Collection, you can edit patches in the software to your heart's content. So I could load up a patch for something like this ARP 2600. You can see that I've just loaded it on the keyboard itself. And what you're actually hearing is the sound out of the Astrolab. I can go into App-Astrolab Pro, and I can go into the Explore tab and then hit Edit Preset, and then I can go open that synthesizer, and I can start messing around with parameters in the software. So you can edit patches on the computer. There's no question about that. I want to make sure that's clear. But you have to own the V collection. You have to own this synthesizer. But let's come back to the V collection in a second, and we'll talk about one other type of product that they sell. So we've got this synthesizer meant for the sound designer. So when you play with parameters on the hardware, the software is going to change too. And it's this beautiful muscle memory thing that happens that is kind of magical. So why isn't that the case with the Astrolab? And what I think it is that when you have things like, cutoff, envelopes, all of those different parameters on one synthesizer, it's easier for them to make an interface that can connect with those things back and forth. But when you're talking about having, I think, up to 39 instruments, maybe not quite just yet, but dozens of instruments that all have different ways of synthesizing sound, there really isn't a way for them to go, okay, let's just make this the LFO knob, and then now every synthesizer that you open up, if you play with this knob, it's going to change the LFO. All of their synthesizers are so different, so I think that is why they have to use this Analog Lab software as a place to host each one of their instruments, and then give you some level of control with those macros. So here we have the Arturia keyboard, and we have other keyboards like the Native Instruments Complete Control Mark III there that are software controllers. So there's no sound on board with these ones. You hook them up to the computer, you need a laptop or something like that to use the sounds, of course. So we all understand what that means, but if you are somebody who wants to design sounds and have that hands-on control, a keyboard like this with customizable knobs and sliders might be a better way for you to go. It also has transport controls and pads, which we don't have on the Astrolab, and that's just not what it's about. So let's look at the keyboard itself and talk a little bit about it. As you can see, this crazy little dial/display is kind of the focal point of this keyboard. It's a browser, so you can turn the dial to get to different patches. You can click it. You can view parameters, so as I'm adjusting the effects. So as I turn up the reverb, you can see the reverb volume going up. Turn up the delay. It is a small little display. There isn't a lot of information on there. So you can see you've got your sound banks, your playlists, different types of instruments, and you can go by artists as well. So I can just click on types, and then now I can see I'm in the bass category. Let's go to pads or piano, whatever. Click that, and then now we're listening to patches. We've also got buttons on the front to choose categories. What I would love to see is if you clicked on the lead category, right away the first few patches would be your favorites. And right now it isn't that. I'm not sure what the order is for these patches, but what would be super helpful to me would be able to have my favorite 10 pianos show up. As soon as I click the piano button, I can get to any one of those pianos, or my favorite 10 basses or something like that. You can see that we have two parts on here, so it's not a multi-timbral synth, but you can have two different patches at the same time. And some patches, you'll see one patch that has two different parts to it. And so that has two different layers, two different parts. We can have splits. We can split up our keyboard and have one patch on the bottom, one patch on the top. We've got the arpeggiator and the chord mode that you're going to find on other Arturia keyboards. And we get these lights that are going to show up to help you with scales. So if we go to a piano patch and hold Shift and click the button, now we get scales, and we can see we get the lights showing up here for C major scale. Mess with that. If we long click that, we can go and say, all right, let's make this C minor instead of major. And now the lights change to show us C minor. You can also do the chords, and the chords can be bound to a key. So if I press the chord button and hold Shift to edit that, let's go to a minor, and we're going to go down to what type of chord it is, and we're going to say, let's go to a major 9 chord. Well, we're in C minor. What happens if I play a C? It's actually playing a C minor 9 chord. And what happens if I play A flat? Now it's playing a A flat major 9 chord. F, it's playing F minor 9 chord. And G, it's playing a G minor 9 chord as well. So the magic that's happening right there with that chord mode is as soon as I set the key, it's not going to let me play any chords that aren't actually in that key, which is really cool. Because usually if you chose a chord mode of some sort and you played a C major 7 chord, if you played a B note, it would play a B major 7 chord. Or if you played an A, it would play an A major 7 chord. And that's not musically useful at all. So the chord mode, the way they've got it configured here, is very useful. So anyways, very cool stuff with the chords, with the arpeggiator. It does have a looper built in as well, so you can record small sequences up to 32 bars at this point. And I think they're going to be adding more features to this, like hopefully the ability to quantize one of these days. But right now it's got kind of a simple little looper that you could probably use live if you wanted. I should mention the keys feel great. They're not weighted keys, but they do feel good, and they do have aftertouch as well. So let's talk about these macros a little bit, and you can see how they relate to Astrolab Pro. So up here, we've got the macros that reflect exactly what you've got on the hardware itself. And if you don't own the V collection or the software that you're tweaking, then you can't reconfigure the macros. But if you do, if you own Pigments, you can reconfigure these macros on each patch to be something else. So if it was like a filter that you always wanted to adjust, you always wanted this to be the filter and you always wanted this to be the cutoff, you could go and tweak that stuff on your patch inside Pigments on the software and then dump that patch onto your Astrolab. And now you got your filter cutoff and your filter resonance as your first two knobs. So this kind of customization is possible, but again, you have to own the software. So next thing we need to talk about is the V collection and Astrolab Pro, and what you get when you purchase this keyboard and you get installed Astrolab Pro. And this was confusing to me because when you get this keyboard, you're going to get Astrolab Pro software, which comes with 2,000 sounds, all made with these instruments that you're seeing right here for the most part. You haven't bought Pigments, all you've bought is this keyboard, and you can load up patches that were made in Pigments. So I double click on a Pigments patch, and now you are actually playing Pigments inside Astrolab Pro if you're using the software. You're also playing with Pigments if you're just using the hardware. But in order to go in and really start tweaking the patch in Pigments, you need to own Pigments. So basically what they've done is they've figured out a way to give you all of their instruments in a way that allows you to play patches. So you can play any patches made by anyone, whether it's made by them or a third party. You can purchase these sound banks and you can open them inside Astrolab Pro and you can play those patches. So if you have the V collection and other sound banks installed, you'll see that I do here, and I've got 17,000 presets, which is kind of insane. But I've got all these different sound banks and I haven't figured out how to just drag and drop them onto the Astrolab. But what I have done is just made little playlists down here. So on my Astrolab in Astrolab Pro, I was able to make playlists and then copy over the patches from these different sound banks. So I'm assuming there's going to be a different way to do that. And so I'm looking forward to figuring out how to do that and how to access that from the keyboard. If I click on the Astrolab library, you can see how much of the disk has been used. And there's only 22.5 gigabytes of internal storage. So are you going to be able to expand your storage in the future? I hope so. That would be amazing. Maybe one day we'll be able to hook up a hard drive to the USB port or something like that. But for now, we got 22 gigs of storage, and the 2,000 or so patches that they ship with the keyboard take up about 7 gigabytes of storage. So there's lots of room left to put more patches on, drag any patches I want over to the Astrolab library, and they will now show up on the Astrolab. So a big question I had right away was samples. Can I import my own samples? And the answer is yes, sort of. And there's a bit of a workaround right now. It's not something you'll find in the manual. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit. We're going to actually make a patch using a sample. And then I'm going to show you a couple of steps you have to go through to get it to show up on the Astrolab. So it's just a little bit convoluted. I'm sure that they'll streamline that in the future, but it's not something you're going to read about anywhere. So let's just look at a category of instruments that relates to what I was just talking about. And so I'm going to navigate to Instruments with this little browser and click down on it. And then we're going to go over to sampled. They made this sampler specifically for Astrolab. So if I click now on the sampler, we can see we've got a bright harpsichord. I can go to a marimba. And then if I want more reverb, I just turn it up. Turn up the delay. And if you just click the delay button here, it's going to turn off the delay. Turn it back on. And now hold it down to edit the delay. So we can change the different types of delay. So let's go to digital delay, just click the button, and then we're going to go to preset, and we've got a bunch of different presets, and we can obviously make our own. So let's go to classic ping pong. So very cool, very easy to get in there and start playing around with things like reverb and delay. And then we've got these other macros, and you can see these macros that have always shown up in their Astrolab patches in the past. And they've got things like brightness, and then timbre, time, adjusting the attack. So it's usually going to be something to do with the envelope. But again, we don't get to necessarily dig in and say, just adjust the attack or just adjust the release of an envelope. You're kind of bound to whatever they've prescribed these two. Now we got movement, some kind of LFO that's attached to it, chorus, and phaser. So now on the actual computer, we can go in and edit this preset. We can go and change the effects. We can say instead of chorus, let's use a flanger. And now it automatically says flanger down here. So some really quick, basic kind of controls over things like that. And this sampler, these sampled patches sound really good. So there you go. There's our sampled patches. Let's see what else we got. Vibes, that's a big one too. Great. Okay, let's try another patch, stereo strings. So there's our Mellotron patches, right? And hopefully we get more acoustic patches, because I do think it would be great to have just really kind of bog standard sampled patches that you might need other than things like pianos and electric pianos. So we'll see what happens with that in the future. And if you could make some sort of streamlined sampled patches, multi-sampled patches that can be imported into this, I think that's just going to be a game changer for this thing and for people who are using it in live situations. And one more thing I almost forgot about is the fact that we have this thing called App-Astrolab Connect, which is an app. Again, I was hoping that maybe through the app we could go in and do some deep editing, but that's not really what it's about. It's just maybe a little bit more of a convenient way for you to go in and look through your sound banks and your patches, maybe your songs. And so you connect over Wi-Fi. It also has the ability to connect over Bluetooth. Really what that is for streaming audio through the Astrolab. So if your Astrolab is connected to the sound system, you could then have like some beats playing on your phone, which would then get through the system as well. So yeah, I can see my library. This is where I've got my patches made. And then they have access to the sound store as well. So yeah, that's really what this app is about, is just maybe just bigger control for what you've got on here. I don't think, from what I can tell, it doesn't really offer us anything different, but maybe in the future, something more will come with that. So next thing I want to do is show you how to get a sample into Pigments onto the Astrolab. So let's go over to Pigments. We're going to start from scratch with a Pigments, and you'll notice a very strange thing about all of these patches is if I click open, there is no way for me to load up an initialized patch. And we usually do that from this menu up here. We can't do that with the Astrolab connected, and I'm not sure why, but what you can do is just go and browse default. Now we're gonna see, and we're in Pigments, we're gonna see a default patch, and I guess they made these ones. We can double click on that. Now I can click edit preset and go open Pigments. And now I've got just a default patch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this little clip from my last YouTube video, just a little chunk of me talking.
New session basis, this one is what I've been asking for, bro.
New session basis, this one is what.
Okay, so this is me just talking, beginning of my last YouTube video. I'm going to turn on granular synthesis. And then let's choose where it's starting. Okay, so I just messed around with it a little bit, got some effects on there. So the next thing we need to do once we've made a patch, save this preset, and let's just call this Grainy Jeff. And this is all you got to do to get this onto the Astrolab. We got to go export the preset. I'll put that on my desktop, and then I'm going to import that preset back into Astrolab Pro. I'm sure in the future this is going to get more streamlined. But let's just open that up. Imports it. Says it was successful. Now I'm going to go take that preset, and we're just going to drag that onto my Astrolab. So I'm just going to put that in Jeff AL Faves. Now, just to prove that this is actually running on the Astrolab, let's quit Astrolab Pro. And now we can see Astrolab is no longer running, but that patch is on the Astrolab. So something like Pigments, you could go in and bring all sorts of samples, or any of the other instruments in the V collection that actually can import user samples, import your samples, and then export your patches and bring them with you on the Astrolab. So for now, that's a way for you to get sounds out of the computer. And in the future, hopefully we have the ability to take like multi-sampled sounds and put them onto the Astrolab and make your own sampled patches that you can take with you. It would be extremely powerful, and definitely a feature I would be begging for. But the fact that we have Astrolab running inside this keyboard is quite incredible. And I gotta say, I am impressed with it, and I know that there are a lot of people who are really gonna love this thing. If you play at churches, you can make your playlist for every service that you do, have all your songs, have all the patches ready to go, and you're just kind of clicking through the presets, pulling up the patches that work for you for each song. If you're a live musician, this is going to be incredible. So hit me up with any comments, and thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Arturia, for sending this over. I love what you guys do. I can't believe you've been around for 25 years. And I'm excited about the next 25, and hopefully I'll be making YouTube videos for the next 25 as well. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.